Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Owens with the District Department of Transportation, better known as DDOT, and welcome to DDOT Delivers. Each week, we take you inside one of the district's largest government agencies for a look at what we're doing to serve residents and visitors of the District of Columbia. Today, our guest is George Branyan. He's manager of the Active Transportation Branch at DDOT. George, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Terry.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what you do every day, one of the things we like to do here is to sort of go behind the scenes and learn a little bit about our guest and just the journey that brought them to the agency, so that it might inspire somebody else who hasn't thought about transportation that, hey, this might be a career ladder for me. Talk about your journey, George.
Yeah, happy to. My journey has been very non-traditional and may bring inspiration to those who are looking for new opportunities and career changes. I was a high school teacher in the late 90s and was, as much as I liked teaching, I was kind of looking for a change. And I decided to try to switch into highway safety and was really quite lucky enough to...
What were you teaching in high school?
I was teaching social studies to 11th grade, U.S. history and government. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And so I kind of leveraged some contacts from previous jobs, and I had been a car mechanic earlier in my life, sort of one of my earliest passions. And I thought maybe there was some type of career related to the highway safety mechanics that cars have that I might be able to put together somehow, and ended up applying for a job in Maryland with their highway safety office in the year 2000, and lo and behold, got that job. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing occurrence, but it opened up some fabulous doors. I really became extremely impassioned by the pedestrian movement that was just beginning in the late 90s and around 2000, where a real energized movement to make our communities more walkable and safer for all people to walk and to bike. And so as the pedestrian coordinator, among other fields, among other programs in Maryland, I started working to try to improve pedestrian safety. And then a few years later, the job opened up at DDOT for a pedestrian coordinator, and I was lucky enough to get that job, and so that brought me to DDOT in 2005.
And today you're wearing a slightly different hat. You are the manager of the Active Transportation Branch. For people not familiar with that unit of the agency, what is Active Transportation?
So our team is 5 planners who work for me, who oversee 5 different areas that improve both biking and walking within the district. So they're planners, so they design and then in some cases implement plans to make biking and walking safer. So I have a Safe Routes to School coordinator, so he specializes in the school area to try to make it safer for kids walking, kids biking, as well as many people know, there's a lot of parents who need to drop off and pick up kids, so there's a lot of safety issues with that. Have a trails planner, so all the trails, the Metropolitan Branch Trail, the Capitol Crescent Trail, there's a new South Cap Trail in planning. There are multiple trails that the district is planning, designing, and will build in the future, and he is working on that. And then I have a bike lane planner, probably most of the bike lanes that have been installed in the district, he's had a hand in over the last 15 years, and he works on the bike lanes. And then I have 2 new people who are working on both cycle tracks, these new protected bike lanes that we're putting more and more in, as well as focusing again on the pedestrian issues that I used to be primarily responsible for on the team. So we have a great team, multi-disciplined, multi-talented team working on these issues.
Talk about the importance, the relevance of what your team is doing to change the face of transportation in the district.
Yeah, this is part of a national movement to make cities walkable and bikeable. There have always been a few hardy souls out there who, even in the 1970s, 1980s, were trying to bike, and that has changed to a movement to make biking not just for those type of riders with the Lycra and the road bikes, but to make it so that someone could jump on a bike and get go about a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles to work, and do it safely without feeling like your life is threatened. So that really guides everything we do with our bike lane planning, is to create facilities that make it easy for the average person to get on their bike. And that's something that is that a lot of cities are looking at, but we're leading the way. We're now at 5% of DC residents are biking to work in the district, and that's overall. If you look at just some of the neighborhoods that are the very intense biking areas, we're seeing 15 to 20% of the people who live in Capitol Hill are biking to work. People who live in Columbia Heights are biking to work. So we've seen a lot of success. And then on the pedestrian side, again, DC has always been a walking city. It's fairly dense. It's got a good grid, what we call good bones in the planning field. It's got a lot of intersections, a lot of places to cross the street. But we do have some big roads, and some of those roads are hazardous to cross, difficult to cross. So we've been working on a lot of techniques. People may have heard of the hawk signal, which is one of the new.
I was going to ask you about technology and how that's changing what you're doing. Yeah,
some new things have come about and that have been given the green light by the feds for us to use on our roadways, and that's one that's we have I think 17 of those in the district, and they help people get across big busy streets. We have some other fairly low tech and high tech solutions that help slow down cars and get people to be able to cross the street more safely.
And we've also experimented in a lot of ways. The Barnes Dance. Was one that tell us about that for people not familiar with it.
Yeah, so it's something that it's funny. We think of it as quite unusual or experimental now, but this was something every city had many of. Actually, it began in the Midwest in states like Indiana. Back in the 40s, an engineer named Barnes innovated it, and he came to Washington for a time, and so that's why we had them all. 14th and G, 13th and G, 12th and I. There's a bunch of streets intersections that old timers from Washington will remember. And I've had people call me and say, "You need to bring that back." When I grew up in DC, it was wonderful. All the cars stopped and we could cross. So we put one of those in Gallery Place, Chinatown, right at 7th and H, and it works pretty well, and it has some dragon artwork to highlight it, to bring some of the Chinese cultural identity back.
Now, for people not familiar with it, how does this work exactly?
So the cars get to go one direction, and then the cars get to go the other direction, and then all the cars come to a halt. And you can cross diagonally as well as with the crosswalks around the outside. And so that was the first one. And then we added another one at Columbia Heights at 14th and Irving, which is also doing really well because that's a very intense location. And it's not for everywhere, but places where we have literally more pedestrians than motor vehicles, that's a place where it can be very successul because it really does advantage the pedestrians.
Yeah, George, I hear the excitement in your voice when you talk about this stuff. You really enjoy what you do.
Yeah, it's an honor to be part of DDOT. The city is doing a lot of innovative things. We're in the lead in so many ways, and it's great to come to work every day. There's no shortage of great things to work on here.
Okay. We are talking with George Branyan. He's manager of the Active Transportation Branch at the District Department of Transportation. You're listening to DDOT Delivers on 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov. Let's take a break, why don't we? Come back in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody. This is DDOT Delivers on 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov. I'm Terry Owens. Our guest today is George Branyan. He's manager of the Active Transportation Branch at the District Department of Transportation. George, we were talking in the break about sidewalks and just how important they are to improving on the walkability of our city and also pedestrian safety. People often hit us up talking about sidewalk conditions, the need for a sidewalk. How does that find its way to your office?
My team, through the Safe Routes to School program, initially is responsible now for most of the new sidewalks in the district. This is something that our asset group, which repairs existing sidewalks, has done some of in the past. But the rules changed in 2010, and there's a law that requires that there be a sidewalk on at least one side of every street in the district. But it also has some notification and some process requirements. So not to get too complicated, but the folks who repair sidewalks are, as you know, they're also doing resurfacing and curb and gutter, and they move very fast. and they need to move fast. This is part of their commitment to the citizens to repair and move things along as fast as possible. Those notice requirements make it much more difficult for them to put in new sidewalks. So that has fallen to my team, and I'm glad it has. And so for the last 5 years, we've been building sidewalks. There, about 5 or 6 years ago, there were about 90 miles of roadway missing sidewalks in the district.
Wow, really?
And these are not the freeways, but streets that should have sidewalks. On one or both sides. So we have been working for 5 years to put in these sidewalks, and it is, in my mind, basic transportation infrastructure. It is something that every community should have, but especially a city where we want to encourage walking, but more importantly, safe walking. So we've been out and we've installed about 12 or 13 miles of sidewalks in the last 5 years, and it's been a fabulously satisfying thing to do, to see communities and see the outpouring of support. Unfortunately, there are some communities that don't have sidewalks, and the people are not always all that interested in sidewalks. And I think it maybe shows the shift of the cities, of the perspective of people in the city that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, just people didn't think twice about driving everywhere. And now we're trying to encourage people to use transit and to use walking as a viable mode of transportation. So what we've had to do is do some very delicate negotiating with adjacent homeowners. And the thing for folks listening is to realize that in almost every case, we're adding a sidewalk to a street. We are going to put it on DDOT property, on city right-of-way. It will not be on private property. And as of a change in law in 2002, we pay for 100% of it. A lot of people in the past used to file petitions either for or against a sidewalk. And that petition process was around for almost 100 years.
Wow.
But it changed in 2002, and this did not get well publicized at the time. But because DDOT is paying 100% of the cost now, it is not necessarily up for a vote. It's nice for neighbors to talk to each other and try to build some support, find out who's against it, and if they're against it, why. And then I'm happy to come out and stand in people's front yard and show them where the sidewalk will go and assure them that it's not going to devalue their property, because actually these days sidewalks improve property values because people are looking for homes in walkable communities across this country and region. So.
And the bottom line is this is all about public safety, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, the ultimate bottom line is if you see a woman pushing a stroller in the street, it just makes the hair on your neck stand up, because you just know that's not a safe situation. And we have that in our communities in this city. And so we're working systematically to try to get those sidewalks in so people can walk outside of the roadway. And especially on some of the busier roads, we are still kind of remarkably missing sidewalks on some fairly busy roads. And these are roads with bus stops in some cases. And there's a lot of research to show that if you have to walk in the roadway on a busy road, the chances of being struck are much, much higher than on, say, a very low traffic street in a neighborhood somewhere. So it's high priority on our team's part to address those missing sidewalks on the busy streets.
You guys are working very closely with the Vision Zero team. Talk about that.
Yeah, so Vision Zero is, again, the mayor's initiative from 2015 that DDOT is a big part of. We're not the only part of. Obviously, other agencies such as MPD, the police department. We've got the Department of Motor Vehicles as well. But DDOT has a big role because we control the infrastructure. The transportation infrastructure is our boat, and so we are working very hard to try to re-engineer our streets to slow down traffic and to make it safer for other modes to share that space with traffic. One of the things that always comes to mind when I think of Vision Zero is this statistic that if you are struck by a vehicle that's going 40 miles an hour, you have about a 90% chance of dying. If that vehicle is going 25 miles per hour, the chances of death drop to about 30%. 30 to 35%. So there's a lot of wisdom, safety wisdom, in getting people to drive the speed limit so that they can avoid a crash, with anything, but especially a vulnerable road user like a bicyclist or a pedestrian. And then if that crash does occur, and crashes do occur, we're all human, we're all prone to error, then that crash is not a fatal crash or a very severe injury crash.
So what's the message we need to be getting out to the public around speed? You just cited some statistics that if they don't hit you in the face, they should. But what's the message we need to be delivering?
Yeah, I think we all share the space here in the city. This is our city, and everyone has an equal right to use the transportation system safely. And so, people need, when they're behind the wheel, and I think this is where it's most important, because you're going to cause the harm. And I don't mean to let pedestrians and bicyclists off the hook who are doing risky behaviors. But when they do a risky behavior and they make a bad mistake, they are going to pay the price. So there's always a built-in incentive for the pedestrian or the cyclist to use more caution. Drivers, on the other hand, are in a 2-ton car, and there's just not nearly as much incentive unless they know that there's a speed camera or there's someone watching their behavior who is a law enforcement official. It's a little harder for drivers often to remember that their behavior can cause severe consequences. So I think we all just need to just take it easy and realize that we'll get there okay at the speed limit. Probably get there just a few seconds later than we might have if we were racing, because you're going to get caught by that light anyway, as we all know. So I think it's a perspective that's maybe a bit new in sort of in our thinking, but we've got to sort of back off this idea that we need to just rush everywhere in our motor vehicles.
Yeah, and why is it so important that we embrace multimodal transportation?
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. We have 39% of DC workers are taking the bus or metro to work. That's how many are using transit, and every one of those is a pedestrian at some point in that trip. We don't count them as pedestrians, but you have to walk to the bus stop or the metro station. So we are all pedestrians at some point in the day. So there's just a whole lot of good arguments. And one of the nice things about walking and biking is you're in your community, you sense the community more, you get a chance occasionally to stop and say hi to people. I've struck up conversations with other cyclists who are waiting at the light. There's this whole lot of other benefits to neighborliness and friendliness that comes with those other modes that you're not encased in a motor vehicle.
Okay, you are listening to DDOT Delivers on 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov. I'm Terry Owens. My guest in studio today is George Branyan. He's the manager of the Active Transportation Branch at DDOT. We've got one more segment coming up. We'll take a break and come back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back, everybody. You are listening to DDOT Delivers on 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov. I'm Terry Owens. In studio today, George Branyan. He's the manager of the Active Transportation Branch at the District Department of Transportation. George, I wanted to talk a bit about infrastructure. People often are trying to figure out how they can get another stop sign in their neighborhood, a speed hump on their street. Step back and take us through the process. You're a resident of the district, you've got some safety concerns, and you want DDOT to do something. What's the process?
Well, yeah, we certainly get a lot of requests for stop signs. We get a lot for traffic calming, which is typically what speed humps are involved in. It might be the one thing to realize is some projects, some of the larger projects are in the pipeline and are going to hopefully come in and solve a lot of these problems. One of the projects that I'm really proud of is Maryland Avenue, which has it's going to be a road diet, and we're going to have bike lanes, but also much safer pedestrian crossings, because instead of 4 lanes, there'll be 2 lanes. So those are things that we've always been getting complaints over the years, and so we go in with some Band-Aids, and it makes a little bit of a difference. But sometimes the larger projects are really going to fundamentally change the roadway. But for things for complaints or for issues that aren't going to be solved by the long-term projects, it's important to use your ANC. The ANCs are the lowest and the ground level political body that all DC residents should use. And you have a commissioner who you can contact and say, I feel like this street is unsafe. And then they can take that and contact DDOT. There have been some changes in the process over the last few years. There used to be petitions. We are in the process of removing the petition requirement for speed humps. And so we're trying to make it a more streamlined process where that request from your A&C commissioner, that's sort of the filter. We don't want everyone in the district requesting a speed hump, but the commissioner can send that to DDOT's safety team, and the safety team will take a look at that street and see if it meets the criteria, and then can move forward with planning a speed hump for that street. Stop signs can be contentious. There are some arguments on both sides of stop signs. People think it's going to improve the ability to cross the street if you're a pedestrian. Sometimes it solves conflicts between motor vehicles, but it can if we put a stop sign in where it doesn't meet the threshold, sort of the requirements that are in an engineering manual, sometimes we end up with a stop sign that doesn't feel like it's stopping, or that there's no cross traffic, and people feel like they never see any cross traffic, and yet they keep having to stop. And what that can induce among drivers is a tendency to run that stop sign. And then you're a pedestrian who steps into that crosswalk, and that driver is assuming there's no cars to stop for, and they don't notice you. So we have to be careful. But we are looking at some new stop sign policies to make it a little bit more liberal, but we're not throwing out the engineering book, but we understand the concerns, because there are a lot of concerns in the district about two-way stops that they would like to see four-way. So we're working on some new policies on that.
You touched on something that I don't think most people are aware of, and that is that you guys, in some ways at least, are guided by federal guidelines. You can't just go in and make a change. It's got to meet some federal code, otherwise you can't do it.
Yeah, we can't make it all up. There are people who come in with interesting traffic control ideas and say, you need to do this, and we'll say that is in no manual. Yeah, there is a book of traffic control devices that the feds have approved for use in the states, and DC has signed on to abide by that. There's some wiggle room. You can experiment officially with some things, but you do have to broadly hold on to those rules, and there are some good rules. There's with the same thing with a traffic signal. People say you just need to put a traffic signal in. The stop sign's not enough. Just put a traffic signal in. But once again, if that light goes red and drivers never see any cross traffic, or rarely see any cross traffic, you start to create an incentive to run that light. And so we do have to look at that as well as the community needs. It can be difficult, and I know the public gets frustrated when they hear us trying to explain these rules. But we are bound, and the risk is that we lose some federal funds if we disobey the federal requirements too much. So we have to be careful. But we're trying very hard to meet the community's needs on these traffic calming issues, because they go to the heart of community quality of life.
You touched on a coming project that you're really excited about. Is there another one that you've been involved with over the years that really, when you got it done, you said, yes, this is why I'm here, this is what it's all about?
Well, it's fresh on my mind because we did it last fall, but it was not a particularly complex project, but it was a sidewalk project up in the upper Northwest on Arizona Avenue, where it's, again, a street with 14,000 cars a day, and we determined that it was fairly high on our list because it is a major arterial, but only has a sidewalk on one side. And so we went in, actually the year before, and began with some letters to notify residents. Most residents were okay with it, but a number were very unhappy with it. And they went to their council member, and they went to DDOT, they went to the director, and they said, we don't need this sidewalk. It's going to be disruptive, and we just don't need it. And so it took a year or more, but we ended up convincing everyone on the street finally to accept the sidewalk. There were some holdouts near the end, and I always end up in these projects in people's living rooms, sometimes with my director, trying to explain that it'll look beautiful when it's done. Really, it will look beautiful. And if you're worried about clearing snow, I'll volunteer to come over and clear the snow from it in the winter. But it looks beautiful. It's just a beautiful sidewalk, and the kids are using it to get to Key Elementary School, which is just a block away down the street. So I'm very proud of that project because it certainly fits an important need.
At the end of the day, it really is all about public safety, and I know that's what you guys are trying to accomplish. Anything else on the horizon that you can share with us?
Well, we have some cycle tracks coming up, these protected bike lanes, and I think one I am allowed to talk about is the 20th, 22nd, 23rd. We're gonna be having some announcements soon about which corridor or combination of corridors, but this is sort of a western downtown protected bike lane that'll take you from sort of DuPont Circle area all the way down to the mall. It'll add now to our other cycle track network, which is of course 15th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue that people know about. But again, we have 10 miles of these protected bike lanes, and we're trying to add 10 miles in the next couple of years. So it's we're working hard on bringing those into construction.
Well, George, we appreciate what you're doing, and there are a good many people out there who feel the same way. We know it's not always easy trying to add this infrastructure and work around our friends who are in cars and other things, but please keep up the tremendous work you're doing.
Thank you very much, Terry.
All right. We've been talking with George Branyan. He is manager of the Active Transportation Branch at the District Department of Transportation, and you have been listening to DDOT Delivers. It's a weekly show where we take you inside one of district government's largest agencies to give you a look at all that our people are doing for the residents and visitors of the District of Columbia. That's going to do it for us this week. We hope you'll come back next week and check us out again when we'll have another DDOT staffer here in studio giving you a peek behind the scenes of what's going on at DDOT. I'm Terry Owens. Have a great day, everybody.